Good evening. I'm Professor Murphy, and welcome to our second Berges lecture for the 2015 series. Our speaker tonight is Linda K. Zecher. She joined Houghton Mifflin Harcourt in September 2011 as President, Chief Executive Officer, and Director, bringing with her a strong track record of business transformation and results. And she successfully led the company's transformation into a global leader in the educational content and media. Prior to that, she was corporate vice president of Microsoft's $8 billion worldwide public sector organization. She led a team of nearly 2,000 sales and marketing professionals serving government, education, healthcare in more than 100 countries. Prior to joining Microsoft in 2003, she held leadership positions with Texas Instruments, Bank of America, PeopleSoft, Oracle, and Evolve Corporation. She currently serves on the board of Hasbro Corporation and the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation. She's based in Boston, but she's a Midwesterner from Ohio, and she has a degree from that #1 rated football team, Ohio State University, and an honorary doctorate from Bentley. Her lecture tonight is Lessons in Corporate Transformation, the Role of Authentic Leadership. Please join me in giving her a Notre Dame welcome. Linda?
Thank you, Pat, very much, and thank you, everyone, for having me here tonight. I have to admit, I have not been back on this campus. I was here about 30-plus years ago. I'm not going to tell you how long, but it's such a beautiful campus. I have to also tell you that I spent about 20 years living in Charlottesville, Virginia. So although I was a little unhappy about the football score last weekend, I did feel bad about your quarterback. So I am somewhat of a football crazy person. So I thought I would start with a little bit of a quick overview of Houghton Mifflin and what we're about. Our roots go back to 1832 in Boston. We were primarily a publishing company at the time of all kinds of different trade publications. Our authors included Hawthorne, Virginia Woolf, T.S. Eliot. We now also have Curious George and Carmen Sandiego. So a very rich history in the industry and a very rich history in Boston. Today we are a global learning company. We work with about 50 million students worldwide, and we're in about 150 countries. We are the market leader in the core disciplines of reading, math, science, and social studies, and we have about a 44% share of the market, so about 1 in every 2 students in the U.S. learns to read with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt content. And throughout the career of most children going through K through 12, they have been touched by our content at some time in their career. So the history of the company, we're going through a transformation. Obviously, our industry is going from a transformation from textbooks to digital content. So it's a very interesting time to be running the company. But we've gone through some challenges. I've been there 4 years. We went through our financial challenges of a bankruptcy. About 4 months, we filed for bankruptcy about 6 months after I was at the company. I knew that we had a lot of challenges and we had to get through that. Then we did an IPO in 2012, or 2013 was our IPO, so we've come a long way in the 4 years. But our industry is changing, as I've said, and so we've got a lot of shifting business models and things we have to think about differently. And we have to expand our focus beyond our core business of K through 12 into new areas. So we're increasingly diversifying, going down market into pre-K, also looking at the consumer market for education, and consumer defined as parents, teachers, students, and lifelong learners. So a lot of opportunities for us, a lot of transition, a lot of change. But we have transformed our structure and our culture in order to be successful. And we've really realigned our mission and values around what we believe is going to be this learning transformation. And so we no longer really consider ourselves a publishing company, even though our trade publication is about 20% of our revenues. We really look at ourselves as a learning company because, again, learning is lifelong from cradle to grave, as I like to say. And our goal is to really transform the learning experience. And when I look at how that really manifests itself at the company, our mission statement is transforming people's lives through fostering passionate, curious learners. It's not by accident that Curious George is one of our top properties, and we are all about curiosity. So I think that that's an important component of the company. But when it comes to transformation, I sort of like to talk about my own transformation too, and my own personal experience. You know, I started out my career with my first job, part-time job, when I was in high school as an assistant to the county jailer. And I did that for 4 summers while I was in high school and while I was in college. So you can imagine the experiences and the kinds of things that I went through. My first job out of college was as a geophysicist with Texas Instruments in Midland, Texas. So again, another transformation. But throughout that process, marriage, divorce, another marriage, I've moved quite a bit from Ohio to Texas to Colorado to San Francisco to Virginia to Seattle and now in Boston. All career moves, all things that I think gave me a lot of different perspective and a lot of different challenges and opportunities. But working, you know, in technology and then going into being into a major publisher, I knew nothing about publishing. And when Houghton Mifflin started recruiting me to come to this position, I knew nothing about publishing. And the only way I kind of thought about this was that, you know, how hard could this be? There are a lot of other people that have been doing jobs like this. I'm smart, I'm bright, I'm quick. How hard can this be? So here I am. But the transition that I've had from small town Ohio to actually being honored by the Emirates in Abu Dhabi and being honored and feted with a lunch at his personal home, that's a journey. And so, you know, life takes on a lot of different looks and feels, but I feel like I've had a great opportunity for a lot of experiences and a lot of ways that I could really, you know, really define who I am. So throughout my life, you know, I've had things happen that were lucky. I've had things happen that have taken me in a lot of different directions and things I could never really imagine. And there have been obviously lots of starts and stops and U-turns and many failures and many opportunities to really learn from. But I think with every twist and turn of my professional journey, the one constant and the one thing that I knew I could really control was me. And at the end of the day, I think that you know, I believed in my values, and I believed that the things that were going to make my brand and that were going to make me who I am today was all about me and how I could really control that and how I could control me. So I feel like in thinking about this topic tonight, I thought it was really kind of important to kind of think through what makes leaders and how do leaders become who they are and how do those experiences in your life really transform you. So you're going to hear a lot about leadership over the course of the next couple of months, and you're going to have some fabulous speakers in here talking, and I'm honored to be a part of this group. But you're going to explore a lot of ethical theory, and you're going to explore a lot of meaty topics on justice and things like that. But what I really want to focus on, and what I think is important to me, and what I think is important to my company, and what I think is really important to leaders today, and even in the political environment, is authenticity, and being an authentic leader, and really thinking about what authenticity means. And so, you know, for me, being an ethical leader is also being a successful leader, but it's about, again, honesty, values, and trustworthiness, and authenticity. And while these things are all inside you, and they're not something that you can really study or go home or read a book about, you can read a lot of things around it, it's really about who you are. Because it takes a lot of focus, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy throughout your career to be able to hold on to your authenticity, because you're going to be pulled in a myriad of different ways. For me, whether it's, you know, career strings, whether it's my investors, whether it's my company, whether it's outside influences, you're constantly going to be pulled in a lot of different ways. And the thing that you have to kind of hold on to is what kind of person you want to be, what you want your brand to be, and what is authentic to you. Who is the real you? It's particularly hard, in my case, when you're transforming a company that's 180 years old and who's gone through some of the challenges that we've gone through. And so if you think about authentic leadership, authenticity comes from the Greek word of authentikos, and it means original and genuine and principled. In 2007, the Harvard Business Review described authentic leaders as those who demonstrate a passion for their purpose, practice their values consistently, and lead with their hearts as well as their heads. They establish long-term, meaningful relationships and have the self-discipline to get results. All of that because they know who they are. So as I've rubbed up against all these different things in my career, I've learned a few lessons about authenticity. And so I thought I'd share a couple of those, both from the corporate and the professional and the personal standpoint. Lesson number 1, self-awareness. You have to be self-aware. To be authentic, you need to start by understanding who you are, what you believe in, and what motivates you. And I like to call that the true north. A lot of people, have different names for it. To me, it's my true north. Again, Harvard Business Review, this same study, talked about authentic leadership, and some of the many leaders that they cited, they said that what made them leaders was not something they had read, it was not a particular style or a particular trait that they tried to emulate. What it really came from is their personal experiences and the experiences that they had through their lives and the things that really made them who they are. My story started in Ohio, Middletown, Ohio, just north of Cincinnati. I had a very close-knit family. We all lived very close to each other. I was fortunate to have both sets of grandparents, aunts and uncles, and all those wonderful extended family, all within a mile of each other. I was very close to my grandmother. In fact, I primarily lived with my grandmother most of my youth. But she had an 8th grade education. She was a Rosie the Riveter during the war. She was a political animal, and she focused on her candidates. She worked very, very hard for them, and then when the polls opened, she was at the polls doing her civic duty. She was tireless. She was also a dedicated gardener. She was a great cook. She played a mean game of hearts. She loved her family, but she also really, really loved me. So she loved horse racing, which led to my getting into horse racing and getting into being an avid horse lover. But more than anything else, what my grandmother represented to me was a well-rounded woman, someone that had a lot of different likes and dislikes, and someone that really knew who she was. She was a risk taker. She cut her own path, and above and beyond, it was always family first. So when the war was over and the factories were being turned back over and most of the women were going back to their homes, my grandmother chose not to do that. And she worked in the factory. In fact, she was she created the first union of steel workers and mill workers in Middletown, Ohio. And so she drove that initiative, and she was the leader in that. And she stayed there. And she stayed there not just because she wanted to be different and she wanted to be a leader, but she stayed there because she felt like she could do the job. She was as good as the guys doing the job, and she wanted to be a part of the group. So I take a lot from that, and the lessons in so much of my life, I believe, came from my grandmother. But in looking at my own career and the strength of my grandmother, I also think about my mother. My mother was, completely the opposite. She was the epitome of the Midwest housewife. She was a housewife her whole life. On the outside, she was a sweet lady that always baked cookies for the brownies and the Girl Scouts. On the inside, she had nerves of steel, and she could hold her own against anyone. So, when I think about the influences in my life and who made me who I am and what really taught me the values that I've tried to hold dear, I think it's my mother and my grandmother. So when I graduated from college with a degree in earth science, I moved to Midland, Texas with my husband, and I was the first female geophysicist at Texas Instruments. In fact, as far as I know, I was the first female at Texas Instruments that ever became pregnant. They didn't even have a pregnancy policy at the time. So ladies, I was able to go out on full-term disability. It was great. So my first day on the job, my first 20 minutes were pretty interesting. So I had all men in the office. I was the only female except for some of the administrative staff. And one of the guys came over and introduced himself and said, "Let me give you a little tour and I'll show you around." So the first thing he did was he took me into the coffee room. And he said, "This is where we make coffee." And I thought, okay, first test, I do not make coffee. I am not a secretary. I am not administrator. I am here as your equal. I do not make coffee. And he kind of looked at me and he said, "Well, actually, we sort of take turns. Can you take your turn?" A little odd. But I think what it did for me was that, it was truly a short, insignificant moment in my career. But what it really did was it made me think about how I was so concerned immediately on how I was going to be defined that I didn't really, take the time to say, maybe I should have just said, "Oh, okay, great," and move on. At the end of the day, the authentic me started making coffee all the time because I actually made better coffee than the guys. So it became something I enjoyed doing. But it taught me a good lesson, and again, short moment in my career. But it taught me that I I can define myself, and I need to take the time to think about what people are really trying to look for and what they're trying to ask, and to make sure that I'm not jumping to conclusions. But as you can imagine, being the only female in an oil industry in the 70s, in the late 70s, when there were very few women. In fact, I went to a conference with 10,000 geophysicists that was held in Calgary, Ontario, and there were 2 women. Now, the good news was that they had this fabulous spouse gift. It was a really great purse. And I wanted the purse, so I talked my husband into signing me up as a spouse to get the purse. I thought that was a pretty good thing. But, in going through that kind of career environment, I can't even tell you the number of HR violations that I experienced. And I look back on that today and I think, wow, in some ways, wish I had not had to go through some of that. In some ways, wish that and hope that my granddaughter never has to go through some of those things. But throughout my entire career, that voice of my mother was always there. And that voice was always about do the right thing and maintain who you are and keep track of what makes you who you are. And I've never lost that either. And so, again, that goes back to just being authentic and being who you are. But at the same time, embrace change, embrace new ideas. Don't let the status quo always set you back. And make sure that, that you think about the lessons that you've learned in life and you don't ever give up those lessons because they'll stick with you for a very long time. The second lesson is really about balance and support. So over the next several years, my career took a lot of different directions. I went from being a geophysicist to sales at ADP to running product management and some development at Bank of America. Then I switched direction again, and I became employee number 9 at PeopleSoft, and we took the company through a very successful IPO. And so my career was thriving, and I was really at the top of my game. I was traveling a lot. I was traveling internationally. I was gone a lot, and I had a young son. So I came home one weekend, and my husband was great. He was very, very supportive. And I came home one weekend, and I was in doing some laundry, and my young son, he was, I think, in 5th or 6th grade at the time, and he said, "Mom, we don't do it that way." And I literally sat down on the floor. I melted. I started crying. I thought, my God, I'm not part of the we. I've lost my balance. I've lost my center. I'm not part of the we anymore. So that night, I woke my husband up in the middle of the night, and I said, I have to move east. I have to get back to my family. I can't live in California anymore. I can't do this anymore. We've got to change our career. And to my husband's credit, because this man is a gem, he said, great, okay, fine. So east we moved. 3 years later, after I had driven every carpool you could volunteer for, after I'd sat on the school board, after I'd done a myriad of different things, my son, who was then 3 years older and becoming a little bit of a teenager, suggested I might want to go back to work. He said, Mom, you might really want to think about a full-time job. Now, we laugh about that now and think it's funny, but at age 36, with his own 2 children, he still tells people today that his mother left her career for him. And that's an important thing that he holds on to, and that's an important thing that I hold on to. So fortunately, I had the opportunity to take time off, and I had the financial wherewithal to be able to do that. And not everyone has that opportunity, and I understand that. But what you have to keep in mind is even though you're climbing the corporate ladder, and even though all of you, especially in business school, are thinking about your careers and thinking about the corporate ladder, you can't lose track of that balance, and you can't lose track of that authenticity of what really makes you you. So hand in hand with balance, though, also comes support. And, to be a really true, authentic leader and to be who you are all the time, you need to have a really good support system. And that support system needs to be friends, family, spouses, colleagues. It could be a variety of different people, a mentor. But it has to be people or someone in your life that you can be completely yourself with. Someone in your life that completely knows who you are and can always pull you back to that, to that location, and really knows that this is the real person inside here. This is the real you. And I have had the opportunity over my career to build a long and strong network of people. And people I've shared experiences with, people I've shared history with, people that I've had really open and honest relationships with. And so I've got a lot of trust and confidence in those people, and I think they have a lot of trust and confidence in me. So when I took over as CEO of Houghton Mifflin, one of the first things I had to do was fire the entire management team, which was a bit of a challenge. But luckily, I had a really strong network of people that I could bring in. So I brought in a new head of HR, a CIO, a head of development, a head of licensing, a head of sales, all people that had worked with me for a very long time in my career, some of whom I'd worked with for over 20 years, some of whom had followed me to multiple companies. So I was very fortunate to have this really rich group of people. And the good thing about this is that they knew all, they knew all the pimples. They knew everything that was potentially good and bad. And this is a group of people that never allow me today to get too far ahead of myself. They never allow me to take myself too seriously. And when they really think I've kind of gone off the rails, they are the first to call bullshit on me. And you need that. You need that group of people around you that will continually make sure that you don't lose who you are. And when you start to veer off a little bit, they kind of pull you back to the true you and what matters. So lesson number 3 is if you've got great people around you and you've got good balance and you've got, you're really, know who you are and you've got great, great history that you can pull upon, you really have to have passion and purpose. It all gets down to having true passion and purpose for what you're going to do. So as I came back to work and as I looked at what I wanted to do, I thought I was going to change and maybe do something a little different. I ended up going back to work for Oracle, so I was back in the technology industry and sort of jumped back in. But I did realize that I'd had this incredible experience at PeopleSoft, incredible experience at Texas Instruments in the bank. Now I was at Oracle. I left Oracle to run a small company called Evolve, sold that company and went to Microsoft. So I've been thinking about all these different things that I experienced in all these companies. They're all extremely different. They all have very different leaders. And the one thing that I really came away with that really made all these companies work in their own unique way was their culture. It was really about how their culture developed and what the culture of that organization was. And the other thing that I realized that in my career in each of these companies, that I was successful because I've figured out how to navigate that culture while still maintaining who I was. And so I think that's a really important component of when, every company, every organization, everything has its own culture. So you have to sort of figure out what are the good things about that culture that you really want to incorporate into who you are, but you also have to figure out how to navigate a culture when there are things in that culture that you're not necessarily so happy about or so excited about. So I think that you have to have your confidence in your ability, and if you have that, and then you can navigate these various different cultures. And so then when I was contacted about running Houghton Mifflin, and that was kind of a completely different culture, and as I said, I knew nothing about publishing, I knew nothing about this industry at all, but I figured out, as I said, that I was bright, I was smart, I was quick, how hard can this be? I can figure it out. And we've had a very successful 4 years. We've gone from on the brink of bankruptcy when I joined the company to now, we're almost up 100%, give or take what day of the market you're talking about, over our IPO price. So we've had a really good run, and hopefully we have a continued good run moving forward. But what I'm most excited about in the process of reinventing the business is that I've had the opportunity to really fix something. And fixing something is something I've discovered that I really like to do. And when I look back over all the companies I've worked for, I've always been in a position where there was something I could go do, or I could fix, or I could own, or I could take care of. And that's kind of who I am, and that's what I've become. So when I think about what works for me, it's that ability to be able to go in and fix something. And maybe that's why I can work in these different cultures, because I find something I can hang on to that's about me. But I've also learned that when you are transforming a business, so now I'm in this company that I'm completely transforming from a bankrupt company to a successful company. And I'm in an industry that's in the middle of transforming from dusty old textbooks to all digital content. Again, huge transformation. And what's the biggest thing that I could do to help that company transform? It was culture. When I got to the company, I found out that we truly didn't have a culture, and that we had a myriad of different companies that had been put together, but there was no true culture. And when I would ask people what the mission of the company was, and in my early days, I'd ask people what the mission of the company and the values were. I asked 10 people, I get 10 different answers. And so there was no real firm focus on what the company was trying to do, so everyone could really rally behind that. So the very first thing I had to do was start a bottoms-up effort at the company and a tops-down effort to really define what we stood for, what we wanted to be, what was the culture, what was the company going to grow and circle around, how were people going to get engaged? Because if you didn't know what you stood for and where you were trying to go and what you're trying to do, how in the heck can you really engage and be all in? And so, creating that culture and getting people to be passionate around it and getting behind it was the most critical thing I could do. So lesson 4 kind of came out of that. And that was really about, honesty and transparency. So again, joined the company. When I accepted the position, it was on August 30th. And I started on September 15th in 2011. On August 30th, the board told me, and all of you are in finance and business or some sort of financial area, so you'll understand this. The board told me, and everything I saw prior to taking the position, was that the company was going to have $200 million in EBITDA, and that we had a great, capital structure and all was good. When I arrived 2 weeks later, there was no EBITDA. There was no great capital structure. We were on the brink of not being able to pay the payroll, and I had 3,000 employees. And so a lot happens in the course of 2 weeks. What really had happened was that there had been a complete lack of transparency to the board and to the employees. And putting all that behind you, there's nothing you can do about it then but figure out how you move forward. I gave great credit, and so for those of you that are really on the accounting side and thinking about becoming a CFO, I think this is a really good lesson. I gave great credit to my now current CFO, Eric Schumann. And Eric was a financial CFO for one of the divisions. And he came in and he sat down in my office and he said, let me tell you something. No one else is going to tell you this. No one's going to tell you how bad the picture is. No one's going to tell you that the baby is really ugly, that we are out of money, that this is not correct, this is not correct, the financial statements are not correct, this has been lied to, blah, 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 blah. And he said, and I'm sure you're going to fire me, I'm sure this is my last day, but I feel it's my obligation to you to tell you these things before I left. And so I looked at him and I said, well, actually, how about becoming my CFO and helping me fix it? And so he became the CFO that day. The two of us have been incredible partners for the last 4 years, and we've done all of this transformation of this company together. But the reason that happened is because he was honest, he was transparent, and he put all of that ahead of his own personal gain. And because of that, he had personal gain. And so I think that that's an incredible lesson that, at the end of the day, you've got to be willing to just tell it like it is and be honest and transparent. And sometimes that's not an easy thing to do. When I was going through the Chapter 11, I had to meet with investors constantly, and there were lots of challenges with them. And, it was a constant battle. And it would have been so much easier to give them financial projections which were higher, or financial projections which were more optimistic. And I didn't do that because I wanted to be in the chair 12 months later. And I wanted to make sure that, I was holding the job and I could look myself in the mirror and know that I had been honest and I had been transparent. As we went through the IPO, the night before we were supposed to go had been a horrible market day. And we were sitting in Minneapolis, getting ready to fly back to New York. And I'm sitting there with my bankers from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. And I have a NASDAQ on the phone saying, you've got 10 minutes to make a decision on whether you're going forward or not. And on my phone, I've got John Paulson of Paulson Investments, and I've got Mark Lazary of Avenue on the phone, and a couple of others. And people are screaming at me that we need to pull the IPO, we need to pull the IPO because we're not going out high enough because of the market. And I knew that I had 3,000 people sitting back in the office with champagne waiting for the next morning. I had 3,000 people that were counting on us to make this company right, and that if we didn't go forward, we were going to, the company would probably never IPO, and that someone had to make a call. So I literally hung up the phone, walked into Goldman and the Morgan Stanley people and said, we're going forward. NASDAQ on the phone, got on an airplane, flew to New York. And the next morning, when we're all at NASDAQ and we're going to ring the bell and everyone's very euphoric, I was standing there thinking to myself, this could be the last day I'm at this company because I'm probably going to be fired after today. Luckily, we opened way up. Luckily, we've been going up ever since. So maybe that was a little luck. Maybe that was the right call. I don't know. But in looking back on it, I felt like I owed that transparency to my investors to do what I thought was right for the company. Because if I didn't, and we lost the people, and we lost the momentum that we had, and we lost customers, they were ultimately going to lose more money than they did that day. So at the end, it worked out, but it was a very, very hard thing to do. But in going through that process, I also learned that you have to be very transparent with all of the people in the organization. From all the way down, you've got to be communicating up and down the ladder. You've got to make sure you have open communication. We did town halls, we did roundtables, we did open house weeks, we did employee surveys. We did everything we could do in order to make sure we were communicating with the teams and taking their feedback. And the lesson to be learned from that is that if you're going to ask for feedback, you better act on it. Because otherwise, your whole notion of being authentic and being an authentic leader that's really trying to listen to the team and wanting to understand what they have to say and wanting to get better is not going to work if you don't listen to the feedback and you don't act on it. So it was an important lesson across the board, but I think that we came a long way with that. So the transparency and just the communication was something that we desperately needed. Also, as we were going through the IPO, we had a couple of, and right after the IPO, we had a couple of other really horrible experiences that happened that required just tough decisions, but again, understanding who we were as a company and understanding who I was as a leader. One of those was, how many of you have heard of Joe No Liar and Imagine? You heard of his book? Well, it was at the top list of the bestseller list in New York Times. He'd written a couple of books. It's a really great book. Bill Gates loved it. He was invited to Microsoft. He was invited all over. And about halfway through the launch of the book, when everything was going well and the book was selling like crazy, we discovered plagiarism. And so we had to make the call. And so I made the call to pull the book off the shelves and to offer money back to anyone who had bought the book and to fire him as one of our authors. And that was a tough call because he was popular and his book was great and we were making a lot of money from it. But at the end of the day, how can you be a publisher and how can you be publishing education books and trade books and talking to young children about ethics and teaching them to read and write and math, and then you publish a book that has plagiarism in it because you're going to make money. So again, another tough call, but it was the right thing to do. And we were able to do that because there was no one in the company that didn't believe in what our ethics were. There was no one in the company that didn't believe in what our mission was. And that fell squarely in the area of do the right thing. And so that was really important. Another one was a book by a gentleman by the name of Peter Schweitzer. And Peter Schweitzer was on 60 Minutes. And he wrote a book called Throw Them All Out. Has anyone heard of that book? Y'all don't watch 60 Minutes? So Peter Schweitzer wrote this book about insider trading with members of Congress. And one of the people that he wrote about and spent a lot of time writing about was John Kerry. And at the time, John Kerry was senator from Massachusetts, and John Kerry was also, he's married to Teresa Heinz of the Heinz fortune. And so he used, as examples in his book, he used things that were from the Heinz Foundation that were not necessarily things that John Kerry, who had no control over any of these stocks, had been a part of. And so naturally, we got lots of letters from John Kerry. We got lots of letters from other people. And as we went back through it, we realized that our editors had really not done their job and that they had missed some very key things and that they, because of his celebrity, and because of the kinds of books that he wrote, and because of the fact he was going to be on 60 Minutes, and it was all very exciting, that people let some things slide in how they were going to do their job that they should have done. And so we ended up having to, defend something that we didn't want to defend. When he came back to us with another book, after that one was a bestseller, and we made a lot of money off of it, I said, no way, we're not doing another book with him, and we didn't. And so again, we've had to make choices along the way, and in publishing, especially in our industry, sometimes, there are difficult choices, but you have to, again, remember who you are, what you want to be, what you want your company to be thought of, and what you want your brand to be. And I can tell you that there is no one in my company that would ever bring something to me that they felt was not ethical, because they know I'm just going to say no. It's not a decision point. It's just no. And I think that that's the brand I want for my company, and that's the brand I want to continue to have for me. And maybe that's my mother's voice in my head, I don't know. So in 2015, we acquired Scholastic. This past year, we acquired a new division of Scholastic. We're very excited about that, so we're expanding our business in that area. This has brought on new challenges of bringing on a very large division with a lot of new people, a lot of new products, integrating sales forces. But again, going back to the culture issue, trying to integrate the culture of a company that has, had a very long history, just like we have, and trying to find the way that we can bring the two together and be really supportive and really get the financial gain out of this that we thought we were going to get. But we made a commitment to Wall Street. We made a commitment on what we thought the revenues could be. We made a commitment on what we thought the synergies can be. And we're going to have to live up to that because we made that commitment. And we made it with the full understanding that people are counting on us to deliver on what we say we're going to do. So there's going to be some tough decisions ahead that we have to go through, but we're going to do them from the standpoint of we made a commitment, we're going to do the right thing, and we're going to treat people in the right way, because that's also one of our values, how we treat our people and how we think about our people and training and their careers and long-term making sure that we treat people with respect. So I hope that these lessons have been helpful. And I hope some of the stories I've told you have given you some insights and some of the decisions I've had to make. But at the end of the day, I think the thing I want you to know about me is that, I'm a CEO, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm involved in a lot of different charities and things like that. I do a lot of different things. But most importantly, I'm a really dedicated girlfriend. And most importantly, I really believe that I know who I am. And I know what kind of leader I want to be, and I know what kind of leader I want to inspire others to be. And I think that I'm hoping when the day comes that I leave HMH, that the thing that they say about me is that I was authentic, that I was myself, and that I was someone that truly believed in the values that I tried to instill in the company. So thank you. So I'd love to take questions if anyone has any. Yes?
My name is Elmi. You have talked about, times when you had to make tough calls, following an internal investigation like the case Arthur, who was involved with Microsoft, and later the other example as well. So my question is, are there any instances where you found more gray area and was left a little bit unable to make a clear-cut decision or paralyzed?
Was there ever a time when I had to really I was a little paralyzed by the decision? I think I agonize over every decision. I don't think any decision is easy. I will tell you that two of the people that work for me today at HMH and two of the people that have been with me for over 20 years, I fired previously working for me. Fired both of them, and I fired both of them for ethical reasons. But I felt like that, I wouldn't say I'm a person of deep, deep faith, but I do believe in redemption, and I do believe that people change, and they changed, and so I had the opportunity to work with them again, and I'm thrilled and honored to have that. But I agonize over every decision because people's lives are impacted. When you're downsizing the company, when I first came to HMH, as we were going through this bankruptcy, the first thing we had to do was take out almost $500 million of expense. And $500 million of expense equated to a lot of people. And I think we let go of 500 plus people. And letting go of 500 plus people at that time we were almost a 4,000 person company. Letting go of that many people, you agonize over it. And you know you're letting go of someone who's a new mother or a new father, or they're older, and you try to do what you have to do for the job. And in some cases, you actually can't look at the names. You've just got to look at the numbers, because if you look at the names, you'll find a reason to change every name. And then if you change that name, you're now impacting somebody else. And so every decision like that's agonizing. And I think that if you don't agonize over them, and if they're easy for you, and then I personally think there's something wrong with you, because you can't, what if it was you? I mean, you want to be treated the way, you want to treat people the way you want to be treated, and you want to have respect for the individual. So if you don't agonize over things, I think you've lost your soft side, and the soft side is what makes you a good leader, I think. Wow, you can't be this quiet. What if I ask questions? Yeah, hi.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm curious, I'm interested in writing and everything, and knowing you didn't have a history in publishing. What do you think of that business now?
Publishing industry?
Yeah, I was just curious what you
Yeah. Well, I think publishing is always going to be around. I think the medium is changing. So I think people think differently about how they consume content. It's no longer just in a dusty old book. They have different devices and things like that. But I think the idea of great contact, regardless of the medium that you're trying to ingest it in, is still very, very important. Being able to write a great book, being able to write great content, being able to write content that's going to teach someone to read or teach someone about business ethics and things like that, that knowledge that goes into that content is still very important. So people should not get hung up on whether it's digitally ingested or whether it's on a mobile device, on an iPad, in a book, whatever. They should get motivated around what is the content. Because at the end of the day, every technology company out there, whether they are doing movies, whether they're doing TV, or whether they're doing books, it's about great content. I mean, look at Netflix. Netflix is becoming more and more successful because they're creating great content that people want to watch in their miniseries. That's no different than you're writing for a miniseries or you're writing a book. So how you get your information is changing. It's no longer for children. It's no longer in a brick and mortar classroom. It's anytime, anywhere learning. And so that means that you can get your content in a variety of different ways. If you want to write, writing is fantastic. So if you want to write, I don't think there's any other great personal way to really express yourself than writing. So I think it would be great. There was a question back here?
I was curious, as one of the major publishers in the college textbook industry, if you felt that there were any ethical obligations to make university textbooks more affordable for students.
Well, actually, I can truly dodge that question because we're not in college. We're only in K-12. No, but I do think that the industry, and we've actually thought about going back into college, and we do a little bit in community college. I think that, I'm not sure it's an ethical issue, because the person that writes that book and the person that is creating that content should be paid just like a music industry person, just like a movie person, but the prices don't have to be as big. And in particular case in college, we were talking about this earlier. Is there a way to chunk content? Is there a way to lease content? I mean, Chegg and some others are experimenting with those models. And I think that's probably a way that it's going to go. But giving it away free, what's going to happen is you're going to degrade the quality of the content. Because if you're not getting paid for your work, you're not going to do it. And it's going to become, it's going to become bad content, and that's not going to help anyone. Uh-huh.
You talked about the issue with 10 people defining the mission of the company differently. Can you describe a little bit how you inculcated the culture that you wanted to develop there? What was the process to get to where you wanted to get to?
Well, it was hard because, first of all, everyone in the environment was either an editor or a writer or a former teacher, and here comes this technology person coming in, bringing in all these technology people in an industry that's changing. So it was truly an opportunity for a huge clash in culture. So what we did is we tried to help people understand that everything that we had there today, we honored, appreciated, and needed. But if we were going to survive, we had to supplement with these new things so that we could be prepared for this new environment that we were going to play in. And I think that taking that approach, and we had a lot of town halls. I did one-on-ones. I answer every email. I have an open door policy, much to the chagrin of my assistant, because people are walking in and out there all the time. I figured that my time in the office is not my time to work so much because I have to, be available. I literally moved the coffee pot, back to coffee again. I moved the coffee pot outside my office to force people to come by my door so I could talk to them. I walked the halls, I traveled, and then I started doing what we call these video chats and things like that where I was interviewed. Just anything I could do to just talk to people and start explaining what we were trying to do. And it took time, but people started seeing the change, and as they saw the change, it helped. But when we first told them that, we're bankrupt, you could all lose your jobs. This is what we're going to have to do to save the company. These are the stringent measures we have to put in. And oh, by the way, there are going to be people next to you that aren't going to be here in 2 weeks. That's a hard thing to say. And it was hard. And people cry and people are upset and they're like, not me. And it's awful. And you literally lose all productivity during that period of time because it's just churn. But eventually, people appreciate the fact you were honest with them. And they appreciate the fact that you're trying to save the company. And if you're really honest about how bad it is and what they need to do and what we have to do to save our customers, they'll get on board because they want to help. And most of the people in my company have been there 20, 25, 30, 35 years. I mean, I have a lot of people that have been there their entire careers. And so they got it. And so that was helpful. But it took time. Yes.
Hi, my name is Betsy. I'm an MBA student here. I had a question about, you have such a variety of career experience from oil industry to tech to startup, now to publishing. What are maybe your first 3 or first 5 steps in, I don't know, the first week or the month that kind of stand out in your mind that you try to do to learn that new industry to make like a comprehensive job change?
I think I try to meet people. I'm big on trying to figure out who are people that can help me. And, I tend to glom onto a couple of people and try to figure out who can help me. And I ask a lot of questions. And I do a lot of homework. I try to read up a lot on the company. But at the end of the day, I try to understand, okay, what is my job? And what am I supposed to do? And then, what are the things I need to do to do that job? And I try to work out from there. It's not an exact science. I mean, every company is different. When I was at Texas Instruments, I was petrified. And the interesting thing about TI, this is kind of a short little quick story, but being the only female, and because my father was not sure I would ever be anything other than a receptionist, because that's all he thought women did, that he convinced me to take key punch at NCR in Dayton, Ohio. So I could key punch. So in those days, when you were programming, we had the old key punch machines. So the guys, when they were running their geophysical programs, it would take them 2 or 3 days to get the decks correct because they couldn't key punch. I could get my deck done in like an hour. And so I was really quick. And so I leveraged key punching as the fact that this was a skill I had. And so I was faster than all the guys in the office. Therefore, all of our customers in the oil companies wanted to work with me because I could turn our deck around. So I didn't, tell anyone it's because I was a great key puncher. They thought I was just a great geophysicist. And so it's just using your skills and figuring out what you're good at and figuring out how to kind of maneuver through the environment.
Hi. So you gave an anecdote about your time at Texas Instruments when you became pregnant and the maternity leave, arguably, or maybe one of the first ones at the company. How has Houghton Mifflin dealt with that in kind of an era where in the last couple of years we've seen a big expansion in maternity leave packages?
Well, the first thing I did at Houghton Mifflin was make sure we had a paternity leave, and we put a paternity leave in. The second thing I did at Houghton Mifflin was that, and I didn't know this until one of the employees sent me an email, is that we did not treat adoptive parents the same way we treated natural parents. So we changed the policy, so we now treat adoptive parents the exact same way as natural parents. So I'm a big believer in, balance. And, I raised my family, and I'm a big believer. I've got a daughter-in-law and a son now. She's an auditor by chance. And my son has his own company, and they have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And so they're constantly balancing and trying to figure out what they're going to do. And so I think you've got to make sure that parents understand that this is really important. The other thing we did was we did a relationship with, I think it was Bright Horizon. Was it Bright Horizon? We did a relationship with Bright Horizon, which is a daycare company, so that when we had school days that were off, this was especially important last year in Boston, when we had school days that were off because of snow and weather, that we supplemented the cost of Bright Horizons so that the parents had a much, much cheaper cost to put their children in daycare for the day. And I'm also a big believer at work at home. And when I was at Microsoft, my office was in Seattle, and for 7 years I lived in Virginia, and I went back and forth when I needed to be because I was also traveling all around the world. My assistant and I were never in the same city. And so I know how to do conference calls, and I know how to work in an extended environment. And I work at home. And I tell people in the office all the time, work at home. I'm okay with that. Now, some of the people that have been there a long time, including my CFO, believes that work at home means that you're playing golf on the links. For all of us that came out of the technology industry, it's a standard way of operating. And so I think you have to provide more of those flexible hours for people to give them a different way to be able to address their personal needs, whether it's children or whether it's aging parents. I mean, we all have personal problems that we have to deal with. We have time for a couple more? Yeah. Okay.
Hello, my name is Bhavak, and I have a question with respect to the mission statement. I mean, generally we hear people talking about you need to have a mission and a purpose in life. And for you, you've changed industries, gone from technology to publishing, which is totally different for you. How do you come up with a mission for the firm right from the scratch, and especially when you do not know much about the industry?
Well, we did it, as I said, bottoms up. So there are people that have been at the company for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. And there were those of us that had come from the outside. We all knew that education and publishing, whether it's trade magazines, whether it's fiction, whether it's English books, it's about lifelong learning. It's a learning curve. So we want to change people's lives by creating these passionate, curious learners. We wanted people that want to learn. We want to have content that's so rich and so great that you want to read, and you want to do your homework. We wanted it to be a great experience, and that's what we wanted to be, the very best content company we could be. We created a manifesto, and our manifesto is about what we believe in from our content standpoint and what we are committing to do, and that also kind of went into the mission. And then the curious part, curiosity is the key thing that you want to drive in young learners, whether they're 2-year-olds, 10-year-olds. Curiosity is what got all of you in these, in this group. Curiosity is what got you into college. Curiosity is what got you the grades to be at Notre Dame. And so you all want to be curious. And so I want people to want to learn, not just because they have to learn, but because they want to learn. So curiosity was part of that, and then of course having Curious George was kind of a nice little tie-in. But we all bought into it, and we spent a lot of time on it. And writing a mission statement is not something you just sit down at a blackboard and, this was a grounds up, and we had a lot of iterations and a lot of talking and a lot of thinking about it and a lot of voting on it. Because if people don't believe in it and it's not part of who they are, they're not going to follow it. So it's got to be, and I'm passionate about it. And that's the other thing, the leaders in the company have to be passionate about the mission or people don't believe in it.
Hi, my name is Matt. Do you believe that there's a difference in ingesting content digitally versus on paper? And if so, how does that affect your mission of creating curiosity and learning for young people?
Well, I think that coming out of the tech industry, this probably won't surprise you, but I think digital gives you an opportunity. You can have an adaptive learning environment. Nothing's flat. So you can be able to serve up content based on that person's learning styles, based on where they are in the continuum of learning, especially in young children. I think it's very important. If your idea around digital content is just, it goes from the book to a flat file on a Kindle, that's nothing different. But if your idea of digital and technology is that it can be interactive content, it can be content that you can search, that you can use, or that can serve up smart content based on where you are and help you. And so teachers aren't teaching to the norm, they can teach to that child's learning styles, and then I think it's fantastic. And that's what we're trying to do. But I tell my investors all the time that they're always like, how quickly are you going to go to 100% digital? I'm not the holdup. I can go right now. It's that my students and my teachers that I'm working with every day are not there. And you've got to be where your customers are. But the other thing I tell my investors is giving a child a tablet and telling them to go off and learn Russian is not going to happen. So, you still have to have great content, and you still have to have teachers and people that can help them digest and understand that content. So it's a tool, and it's a fabulous tool, and it's something that, we need to use more and more of. Got time for one more? One more?
Yeah. I was curious, I asked some people, but what do you like to vacation or spend time uninterrupted?
Well, yeah, yeah. I have a hard time taking vacations. I really do try. My husband's much better. He's retired. He's much better at it than I am. And I try to unplug. But what I've been doing lately, and I've really enjoyed, is that every year we are taking our sons and their children on a week trip someplace, whether it's Christmas or whether it's later. This year we're going to Turks and Caicos. Last year we went to Arizona. We went to Hawaii. So we're trying to do something like that because once I get the grandchildren there, then I forget about it. And my husband claims that maybe he's not as important. It's like, no, 34 years, you're very, very important. But the kids, I mean, they're just active all the time. So it's a great way to kind of unwind. So thank you for asking. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.